13 days. That is all the time the world had. 13 days between life as we knew it and the end of everything. But here is what no history book ever told you. The closest moment to nuclear war did not happen in the White House. It did not happen in Moscow. It happened inside a quiet, classified building in Langley, Virginia, inside the Central Intelligence Agency. And the decisions made there almost killed us all. October 1962. The Cold War is not just a political standoff. It is a living, breathing terror. Every morning, Americans wake up not knowing if this is the day the sirens go off. School children practice hiding under wooden desks as if that would save them from a nuclear blast. The United States and the Soviet Union are locked in the most dangerous arms race in human history. Two superpowers, thousands of nuclear warheads, and a hair-trigger tension that has been building for years. But something is about to change. Something that will take the world closer to nuclear annihilation than it has ever been before or since. It begins with a photograph. On October 14, 1962, a U-2 spy plane flying at 70,000 feet above the island of Cuba captures something that should not exist. Soviet ballistic missile installations being constructed 90 miles from the coast of Florida. The photographs land on the desk of CIA photo analysts the next morning, and when they see what they are looking at, the room goes completely silent. Think about that for a second. These are trained intelligence professionals, men who have seen classified material their entire careers, and they go silent. Within 48 hours, President John F. Kennedy is briefed. He stares at the photographs. He asks one question: how long have they been there? The answer is weeks. The CIA had known something was building in Cuba. They had signals, they had warnings, but the intelligence was filtered, debated, and delayed. And that delay is where our story really begins. Because here is the part nobody talks about. The CIA was not just watching Cuba in 1962. They were operating inside it, secretly, desperately, and sometimes recklessly. Rewind to early 1961, just months before the missile crisis. The CIA had already launched one of the most catastrophic covert operations in American history, the Bay of Pigs invasion. Over 1,400 CIA-trained Cuban exiles landed on Cuban shores, expecting air support, expecting backup, expecting a popular uprising. None of it came. The operation collapsed in 72 hours. Over 100 men were killed. More than 1,000 were captured. And Fidel Castro was furious. More importantly, he was scared. And the scared Castro turned directly to Nikita Khrushchev and the Soviet Union for protection. Do you see what just happened? The CIA's failure created the very crisis it would now have to solve. But that is only the beginning. Inside the CIA, in the months following the Bay of Pigs disaster, a secret operation was quietly escalating. It was called Operation Mongoose, and if you have never heard of it, that is exactly the point. Operation Mongoose was the CIA's classified campaign to destabilize, undermine, and ultimately overthrow Fidel Castro. It was run by a man named Edward Lansdale, with oversight from Attorney General Robert Kennedy himself. The operation had hundreds of agents, millions in funding, and the list of tactics so extreme that when they were eventually declassified, people could not believe what they were reading. Sabotage of Cuban industry, psychological warfare, propaganda campaigns, and then the assassination plots. Because buried inside the classified files of the CIA was something almost unbelievable. plans to kill Fidel Castro. Not once, not twice. The CIA made 8 documented assassination attempts on Castro during this period. Some of the methods they considered were almost absurd. An exploding cigar, a poisoned wetsuit, a ballpoint pen rigged with a hypodermal needle filled with poison. I am not making this up. These were real proposals, approved by real people, in real classified meetings. And here is the chilling part. Castro knew. Not the details, but he knew the Americans were coming for him. He knew the CIA was operating inside his country. Every failed assassination attempt, every exposed sabotage mission pushed him further into the arms of the Soviets, further toward asking for something that would guarantee his survival: nuclear missiles. Now we are back to October 1962. Kennedy knows about the missiles. A secret group of advisors, later called the XCOM, begins meeting around the clock inside the White House. And simultaneously, the CIA is being pushed to answer one critical question. How many missiles are there? Are they armed? And are they operational? This is where the pressure inside Langley becomes almost unbearable. CIA Director John McCone is pressing his analysts. The military wants answers. The White House wants certainty. But intelligence is never certain. And in that gap between what they knew and what they assumed, decisions were being made that could end the world. Here is a secret that remained classified for decades. American intelligence in October 1962 underestimated the number of Soviet troops in Cuba badly. The CIA estimated there were around 10,000 Soviet military personnel on the island. The real number was over 40,000. They also did not know that Soviet field commanders in Cuba had already been given tactical nuclear weapons, short-range weapons that local commanders could fire without direct orders from Moscow. Let that sink in. If the U.S. military had launched an invasion of Cuba, as many in the Pentagon were demanding, Soviet commanders on the ground had the authority and the weapons to respond with nuclear fire, and Washington did not know. Kennedy was making decisions with incomplete intelligence, and the CIA was the one providing it. But there is one moment, one single classified moment that historians call the most dangerous 24 hours in human history. And it did not happen in a boardroom. It happened underwater. On October 27, 1962, a day that will be known forever as Black Saturday, a U.S. Navy destroyer detected a Soviet submarine moving through the naval blockade zone. The submarine was designated B-59. What the Americans did not know was that B-59 had been out of contact with Moscow for days. The crew was exhausted. The air inside the submarine was toxic. The temperature had risen to over 100 degrees, and the captain, Valentin Savitsky, believed World War III had already begun. The Americans began dropping practice depth charges, signaling the submarine to surface, but Captain Savitsky did not know they were practice charges. He thought he was under attack. And B-59 was carrying a nuclear-tipped torpedo, a weapon with nearly the same destructive power as the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Captain Savitsky gave the order to arm it. Under Soviet protocol, launching a nuclear weapon from a submarine required the agreement of 3 officers: the captain, the political officer, and the brigade commander, Vasily Arkhipov, who happened to be aboard. Savitsky and the political officer agreed. They were ready to fire, but Arkhipov said no. He refused. He argued. He persuaded. He held firm as the ship shook from the depth charges above. One man, standing in a suffocating Soviet submarine, refusing to end the world. The CIA did not know about the submarine. They did not know about the nuclear torpedo. They did not know that one officer's refusal was the only thing standing between October 1962 and the end of civilization. All of their surveillance, all of their intelligence, all of their covert operations, and the fate of humanity came down to one conversation inside a submarine they could not even locate. Meanwhile, that same day, Black Saturday, a U-2 spy plane, another CIA reconnaissance aircraft, was shot down over Cuba. The pilot, Major Rudolph Anderson, was killed. He became the only direct combat fatality of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy's military advisors urged immediate retaliation. Strike the missile sites, strike the air defenses, begin the invasion. The pressure in that room was enormous. Kennedy paused. He waited. And privately, through back channels that the CIA itself helped arrange, a secret negotiation was happening. A deal was forming. The Soviets would remove the missiles from Cuba. The Americans would quietly remove their own missiles from Turkey, and the world would step back from the edge. On October 28th, Khrushchev announced the missiles would be withdrawn. The crisis was over. The world exhaled. Newspapers declared victory. Kennedy was celebrated, and the CIA quietly filed away its classified reports. But here is what those reports contained: admissions, failures, the intelligence gaps that nearly caused a catastrophic miscalculation, the covert operations that had escalated Soviet paranoia, the assassination attempts that had pushed Castro to invite nuclear weapons onto his island in the first place, the underestimation of Soviet troop strength, the submarine they never found. The CIA's own internal postmortem, classified for 30 years, concluded something remarkable: that American covert action in Cuba had been a contributing factor to the crisis itself, that the hunger to remove Castro had made the world less safe, not more. In 2002, at a conference marking the 40th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis, former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara sat across from surviving Cuban and Soviet officials, and for the first time, they shared what they knew. McNamara heard about the submarine, about the nuclear torpedo, about Vasily Arkhipov. He went pale. He turned to the assembled historians and said quietly, "We came so much closer than we knew." He was right. The Cuban Missile Crisis is remembered as a story of diplomacy, of Kennedy's steady hand, of two superpowers choosing restraint. And all of that is true. But underneath that story is another one, a classified one, a story of an intelligence agency that was operating in the shadows, making choices that had consequences nobody fully understood, a story of covert operations that backfired, of intelligence that was incomplete, and of moments where the fate of millions rested not on policy, but on the moral courage of individuals. A submarine commander who said no. A president who waited one more hour, a back-channel negotiator who made one more phone call. History does not pivot on grand speeches or bold strategies alone. It pivots on moments, small, human, terrifying moments, where one person with incomplete information and enormous pressure makes a choice. And sometimes, that choice is the only thing between us and the silence of a world that no longer exists. We got lucky in 1962, luckier than we ever knew. The question that should keep us awake at night is simple, and it is one the CIA's own documents ask but never fully answer. What happens the next time we are not?